I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything. Now you be surprised at the info you get is by letting them talk, so I'm letting them talk. Gotta keep quiet, maneuver in silence to let them in, chalk up their body, another one body, that's just how it go. I got some secrets, I'm shaking the game so they stay on their toes. Stay in your lane, how to stay on the go. I can play with the pros and act like a rookie, so they overlook me, then I double up again under their nose. None of them cold, they just got lucky but never adapted, so I'm to the one if it's coming to blows. My enemies cutting it close, I let them think that they got me, but what do you know? I had them beat before we ever spoke, I'm ready for smoke. I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything.
Hello, Ash. How are you?
Doing well, Lloyd.
Fantastic. Glad to have you here. And looks like the stage button just went live, so we'll give folks a couple of seconds to triple over. And I'll pull up my PowerPoint here real quick, and so we can kind of let people know what we got going on today.
Sounds good.
All right. Let's see. Okay. All righty. Yeah. So Ash, we've been doing Startup on the Blocks for a little over a year now, and I think this is probably about our 56th event. And so we've been keeping track of the people who've been participating and the sponsors and stuff like that, and also the network meetings. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so trying to accumulate some data on how things are going with Startup on the Blocks. And we have to thank our sponsors for Innisfree for sponsoring our pitch competitions, and the chambers for supporting Startup on the Blocks. And we've been working with the Small Business Development Center as well. And our streaming partners, Bantucola, and one of our pitch competition sponsors is also the First Bank that just came on. So they'll be highlighted at our next pitch event. And Gulf Power is one of our founding sponsors. So we're definitely glad for their support. And so Ash is on tonight. Next week we'll have David Triana. And following later on in the month in October, we have Dr. Natalie Cephas. Ash, I don't know if you know her or heard of her. No, I guess if you remember, Amazon bought this company called Part Pick.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so she was the one that developed all the AI technology associated with that. So she's still working with Amazon, and she's also doing some startup stuff and STEM stuff there in Jackson, Mississippi as well. So we're lucky to get her on. And David Triano, we are going to have him on. He's has a media publication that targets Hispanics, so we're trying to get as many Hispanics as we can in the startup ecosystem as well. Let's see. So like our playbook, Ash, is like, we believe in the lean startup methodology, and so we're telling people to learn that, and since we don't have our own training yet, which we hope to have your training real soon here, as we've been telling people to go to the startup school and actually go through that program, and also creating their profiles on the sites that actually where they can get some visibility and get some freebies to support what they're doing. So yeah, so we're that's kind of what we kind of do, and so we do like a weekly newsletter where we list all the links to all the different places folks can network and all the different accelerator programs and stuff like that, just so we can connect people to the things and the resources so they can help build their startup. So yeah, and so that's a little bit about Startup on the Block. So we're trying to do a lot more than that, but that's just to kind of get a little feel. And so we are honored to have you on. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I usually start off by telling everyone that I'm first and foremost a practicing entrepreneur.
Fantastic.
I happen to have written a couple of books, developed the Lean Canvas, but all those started off as side projects. So I was really focused on my startup for many years. And along the way, like a lot of entrepreneurs, you fall in love with an idea and then you realize something isn't working. Should I just stay the course? What should I do? And so for me, that was not just one idea, but many ideas that really tested my my determination. And at some point, I began to realize that there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way of being able to tell whether an idea is right or not, whether the timing for it is right or not. And I got very interested in looking for answers to that question. And around the 2009, 2010 timeframe, a few other people popped up. Eric Ries, some of you may have named, the author of The Lean Startup, Steve Blank, and they started sharing their thoughts on solutions to the same problem. And so that's how I started on my journey, and one thing led to the other. And that's where I am today.
Yeah, so like I remember when I was started to embrace this lean methodology a little bit. I really didn't totally understand it. I can't say that I do now, but I do know. I always tell people the story in like around 2012 time frame. I started hearing about this business model canvas thing. I didn't really know what it was, and so but when I retired from the government, I started pumping a lot of money into a startup idea I had, and I kind of wish I had knew about the Lean Startup methodology then, because I was literally building something that users said they wanted, but the folks, my customers, I didn't get their buy-in early enough, so I wasted a lot of time not following the methodology, and so you basically building something nobody's willing to pay for, and so so that was a expensive lesson to learn, and then when I think in 2014 I got another startup idea. In 2015, I ended up in an accelerator program, and that's where kind of started embracing, the lean startup methodology, and that's how I got introduced to what you were doing and the books and stuff like that. So that was my connection, and what I as working with other founders, I they would always ask, well, how do you get out these ideas? How do you evaluate them, and what do you do? And so and so in networking tonight, there was a student at UWF. See if I can pronounce his first name. It's Hena, and he was saying, he's learning all this AI stuff, and he didn't really say he knew what problem he wanted to solve, but he said, well, how do you do a startup? Is basically what he was asking. So I guess I would ask you that question. He's a student, and he hear about all this startup stuff, and so um, how can the lean startup methodology help him out?
Yeah. So obviously the ideation process is rather messy. So where do ideas really come from? I don't
Yes.
really have the answer to that. You could be driving on the highway, you could be in the shower, you could have someone come in and tell you they have a problem. So the ideas can come from many different places. What we have over the years we at LeanStack have been focused on is, what do you do next, right? So a lot of
Yes.
people get ideas all the time, but when you get struck with an idea, when you start acting on it, there are certain things you can do first before other
Okay.
things, and that's what we really get to. And so the very first thing, and so one of the traps always with ideas is that when we see a problem, or even the semblance of a problem, we very quickly as entrepreneurs rush towards a solution. Like even in your description there, you mentioned AI, and to me, AI
Yeah.
is more in the solution space than the
Yes.
problem space. And it could be the right solution, but I would try to slow things down and say, what problem are we, like, who is it for, and
Yeah.
what's it for? So who is it for,
Okay.
and so who's the customer segment, and what problem are we really solving? Let's slow down to actually ask that question. And the best way to really think of that is asking, what are people trying to do, and what are they doing today, and why is that broken? And that to me is the
Okay.
simplest way to describe what we teach after all these years.
Okay.
So as an entrepreneur, I was very much in the same boat. I'd see a problem, I'd rush to build something, and then realize, oh, I just missed the mark completely because something else was there and I didn't know this thing existed. And so what we instead encourage entrepreneurs to do is really do some of that research to understand, for the thing you're trying to bring into this world, what currently exists and
Okay.
what's broken with that. And once you
Okay.
find out what's broken with it, it gives you a lot of new inspiration and ideas for how you can introduce something that could displace that or could replace it. So just to give you a very simple example, you could think of ride sharing, or like what Uber did, and of course there are
Yes.
many others after it. But they were trying to get a taxi somewhere, and they got a bad experience, and they're like, oh, this is just not normal. Something should be done about this. And sometimes ideas just start like that. But
Yes.
once you start parsing it out, you begin to realize that when you order a taxi, there are a lot of things that you don't know. Like, when is it going to show up? Is
Yes.
it going to show up? If I have to catch a plane, will it show up on time? Will I miss my flight? Right. So when you get a ride sharing app, it starts to reduce anxiety around all those questions. And so in hindsight, it seemed very obvious, but it wasn't an obvious idea. It was something that the founder stumbled into and then started asking, why isn't there something different? And that's usually
Yes.
how the biggest ideas oftentimes end up being the simplest ideas in hindsight.
Yeah, that's a really neat. I like the way you broke that story down. So so when I think about some of the startups that we're working with, like Quinn, he wanted to he was basically saying that uh, the industry where if you're an artist or a musician and you needed to get bookings, you need to find an agent, and he was trying to say all that was broken, and so he's trying to build something for that, but it was based on his experience, and that and so yesterday I sent him I came across an app that it wasn't exactly what he was thinking about, but somebody was doing it, and he wasn't aware of it. But we have people doing different things, and and that question, what problem are they really solving, and who's and are the customers, potential customers, willing to pay for what they're getting.
Yeah. And I guess on that point, I mean, one of the things that I do find a lot of entrepreneurs do is get discouraged when they see that their idea is out there in the world. And so I just want to maybe address that a little bit, is that
Okay.
I tend not to be as worried about that. And the reason is that we're living in a world now where it has become cheaper and easier than before. I wouldn't say it's like simple or very
Yeah.
simple, but it's cheaper and easier than before to start something. To start,
Yes.
most people back in the day had to raise funding before you could write a single line of code. Everything was so
Yes.
expensive. Computers were expensive. Office space was expensive. Today you can work out of your house. So from that perspective, you couple that with the idea that there are close to 8 billion people in this world.
Wow.
When you get an idea, it seems like an original spark of inspiration, but the likelihood is pretty high, if you're mathematically inclined, that there are going to be many others that get struck with the same lightning bolt.
Yes.
And so when we have an idea, there's a very high likelihood that there are many other people around the world also with the same idea acting on it.
Yes.
The more important thing, though, is where are they in the process, right? Many people will start and then stop and not really go on. So just the fact that something exists doesn't mean it's going to work. So
Yes.
I always caution against, just because someone has launched a website or an app, unless they really have market traction, unless the customers that you are trying to reach say, how are you different from them, I wouldn't really be that concerned with that competition, because they don't, for all intents and purposes, exist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a good assessment of that. And like another example is, the founders, they're really excited about what they're doing and all the money they can make. And I can say I was the same way, and so, but you haven't proven your idea, or you haven't validated your idea, and so how can the lean startup methodology help you do that?
Yeah, so if we break down what the lean startup is all about, the way we advocate practicing it is that it starts with beginning to lay your idea out. So there's a tool that I built. Maybe some of the audience has heard of it, the Lean Canvas.
Yes.
It really is the best way to describe it for those that don't know what it is. It's kind of like a one-page. And actually, while we're here, I can actually just share my screen, and I'll actually just put a version of it up there so you can take a look. Yeah, so I think you can all see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, so this is it. What you see is what you get. So rather than in the old world, we would tell entrepreneurs, go write a big business plan, which takes lots of pages and lots of time to write. This is a one-page document where you can begin to describe, who your customers are. You can see there's a customer box in the top right. There's a problem box. And so you just start filling this out. And one of the constraints, and this is a very intentional thing, is that it needs to fit a single page. When we have an idea in our head, it seems simple, but once we start writing it out, it gets complex very fast because we don't know how to express it. So it's a great exercise in embracing the constraint of a single page and trying to get your idea down. Because in the very early stages, the biggest challenge that I see people struggle with is getting somebody other than themselves to really understand what you're trying to do. If you can explain pretty clearly who your customer is, what problem you're solving, how you're going to solve it, how you're going to go to market, what you might charge for your product, you're like way ahead most of the people. And that is usually step number one. So this is a tool that I developed many years ago, and the intent there is to take your idea, and much like Lego blocks, and that's why you see Lego blocks is here, you actually begin to build some very simple models. And it might be, here's my customer, here's my problem. Once you start to get familiar with the boxes, you start building a lot more elaborate models. Same Lego pieces, these tiny little Lego pieces where you can build life-size X-Wing fighters like in Star Wars using Canvas. All to say that these blocks are universal. Every business model has a customer who has a problem, who has a solution, and that's the foundation. if I was to take this a step further, the next step in the process is then beginning to identify in your business model, kind of in this lean canvas that you have
Yes.
built, what's the riskiest assumption, not what's the easiest thing to do, but what's actually the thing that if it weren't true, the whole business model comes crashing down.
Wow, that's a neat way to think about it.
Yeah, so we've all played this game, I'm guessing, of Jenga. And so we are trying to poke at the foundation, and we want to make sure that in this picture here, the foundation seems pretty solid, but we want to find out what the next weakest link is, because that is a little counterintuitive thinking. You want to break your own idea, because if you don't break it now, it's going to break eventually, and you want to find that weakest link in the idea. Now, what is sometimes counterintuitive is that what is the weakest link today is oftentimes not what we think. We as entrepreneurs think it's, can I build this? Can I raise money? Can I do all these things? But when we think of it from a customer perspective, they don't really care about your solution. They really care about their own lives and what they're trying to do and what you can do for them. So you have to switch your perspectives. And most products today don't fail because we can't build the thing we set out to build, because it's become, with time, money, effort, I find that you can build almost anything today. The biggest question is, should we build it? Is it the right time for it? Do customers really want this? And that's what you fundamentally have to ask. The way we set out to answer that question is the third part in the process, which is starting to run experiments. So when you ask, like, what does a lean startup help you do? The first step, if you can see what we're doing here, is we're laying out a blueprint. Imagine you're building a house, you're building some kind of a architectural sketch. The second part is focusing on the foundation. You want to make sure the foundation is solid. There's no point building a skyscraper if the foundation isn't solid, or putting pretty windows if the foundation isn't solid, because the house will come crumbling down. That's what step 2 is. And the way that you test if the foundation is strong is through experiments. And in the lean startup, we talk about this experiment loop. So build, measure, learn. It's a fancy way of saying go and run little experiments with your customers. If you have an idea, break it down into smaller chunks and test various aspects of it one at a time. And we can maybe do that with more examples, but that is fundamentally what this process is all about. So it starts with the model. We then prioritize what might be riskiest in that model. And then finally, we run these little experiments to test whether the riskiest assumptions are things we can overcome. And if we can, we move on to the next riskiest thing. And if we can't, we try to solve for that first. And that's kind of how we apply this framework.
Gotcha. That's the more I hear that, the more it sinks in. So I'm glad you actually went through that too. Yeah, and we also want to invite the audience. If you have any questions, you can type them in the comments in the stage comment area, and so we're looking forward to answering your questions, etc. Yeah, and so so one of the things I'm seeing is we have some of our founders, they're out there building stuff, and they're building fancy stuff, and instead of just doing the minimal viable thing to prove that work and onboard customers with that. And so can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so in the lean startup, there's this notion of the minimum viable product, as you described, and that is the smallest thing you can build that is enough to deliver value to our customers. And again, as entrepreneurs, we oftentimes are perfectionists, we are artists, we want to build a lot more than usually is needed. We want to polish it, we want to make sure it's perfect because we don't want to be embarrassed when we show it to someone, we want to feel proud. But as an entrepreneur, you have to learn to shed that. I used to be an artist, and that's the stage 1 I call of all entrepreneurs, is we're all artists when we start. Stage 2 is when you shift more to an innovator. And the idea of an innovator is you focus on problems. And if you can solve a big problem with an ugly solution, your customer will be very happy. And that's all you really need. That's a way to describe it. Now, that sounds like a simple idea, but getting to the minimum viable product requires some research and discovery. And this is where there are all kinds of techniques and tactics one can use to try to understand what is it that your customers are trying to do, what are they doing today, where are they getting stuck, what's that top first problem to solve, and then go tackle that. And maybe just a quick example might help. So
Okay.
I always use a very simple example that people can appreciate, because everyone eats food, so you can appreciate starting a restaurant. So let's say you want to start a restaurant. As a restaurateur, a lot of restaurant owners also fall in love with the vision of their idea. They can imagine the menu and the experience and the location, and all of those are important things. But the most important thing is your food, right?
Yes.
If your food isn't any good, you can be in the prime location in town, but you're going to go out of business pretty quick because rent's going to be pretty expensive.
Yes.
If your food isn't good, people will try it once and say this is horrible, and they'll even maybe give you bad reviews, and then no one's going to come back. So you want to make sure that is solid. And that's kind of the idea of thinking of minimum viable product in riskiest assumptions. How do you test your food? You could even just start by inviting friends over. When they start asking, where did you cater this food from? That's already a sign that your food is at a whole different level, right? It's something that people may spend money on. You could go into the catering business. You could open a food truck. You could do a pop-up restaurant. But all of those are faster ways of testing the concept of your restaurant before taking the big leap and opening a brick and mortar restaurant. And of course, in recent years, food trucks have had a big splash here in the US. You see them in many different cities.
Yeah, here too.
Yeah, so a lot of high-end restaurateurs are taking their food trucks, driving it around town, testing locations and menus and pricing. And based on that research, they then open a brick and mortar location. So that's just a very simple example of how you can take the risky business of opening a restaurant and try to apply this kind of iterative approach to kind of launching something smaller and then growing it versus doing the big bang launch and risking failure.
Yeah, I'll get to a couple of questions in the chat there, but I did want to mention. So one of the founders we're working with, he has this method for teaching golf, and so this is teaching people how to do golf swing, and so he says it's different than current approaches, and so this has to I'll relate to one of the questions somebody is asking. Natalie is saying, how long do you need to validate? And so I'm not sure what that question is really asking, but so like if you have an idea and you haven't built it yet, and so like with the teaching a person how to play golf and using AI or whatever to do that, but so I guess what I wanted to relay is that. So I asked him, I said, how many people have you validated your methodology with? And he said he validated on himself. I said, and so you're trying to get people to invest money, but if you did like a little pilot thing with a group of 10 people or 5 people and validate it on with those people, and then that's more ammunition that you can tell the potential investor that you've proven that your method actually works. So yes. Natalie is asking how long do you need to validate? I'm not sure how she's asking that.
Yeah, so if you're going to clarify what stage you're in and what validate means, I think Lloyd's having that same question in his mind, which is what do you mean by validate? Because the answer will vary depending on whether you have a product or you're pre-product. So I think if you can clarify, that would help. But if I go back to the golf, example, yes, I would say that unfortunately, when it comes to validation, you yourself as the entrepreneur don't qualify, because the problem there is that you had a problem. You are also the person who built the solution. So you're a data point of one, and you can't build a business just with yourself. Yeah. So that doesn't work. Your friends also, I mean, it's great to get started with people but they also very quickly you will outrun that, because you're trying to build a business that's going to be repeatable and scalable. So your friends don't count. You can use them to get started, but of course you have to move beyond them. Your mom definitely doesn't count. We did even a book called The Mom Test, because she's going to just love everything you do. So you've got to move, and that's where, like, we almost say you've got to prove to a potential investor that people other than yourself, your co-founders, your team, your friends, your mom care about your idea, and then you've got something. And then even then, like, there's always a question of what scale are you looking at. So obviously, if a company like Facebook only got success in one school and then they fizzled out in all the other schools in the early days, that would not have worked. So sometimes we need more evidence or more validation than other kinds of ideas. And so the question is going to be largely dependent on what scale you're working at and really who you're going after.
So if I look at the question of validation, so you kind of validate through whatever the use cases for the problem you're trying to solve, and I kind of I go back to my days working for the government, and we want to drop missiles or fly missiles off jets, and so you're not going to be able to fly that thing. So until you prove that weapon is it's not going to come back and hit the plane. So now, if you want to clarify that a little bit more, you can. Hanan, he's asking, what are the difference between lean model to the Spotify Agile? So I'm not sure what that question is either. So lean. Oh, you may understand.
Well, so I can take a stab. So I mean, so if I understand, like, the Spotify Agile is the way of working, and it's kind of agile.
Okay.
And so if you look at lean, to me, lean is agile plus plus. And the best way to describe it for those that are familiar with agile is agile really focuses on iteration and focuses on taking a solution and building it out in stages. The difference between agile and lean is lean just takes it one step further. Is that in agile we stop when, I mean, it's actually undefined. When are you done? Like when are you done building a product? Is it when it's feature complete? Is it when it's working? Is it when the customer accepts it? Like, it's not really that defined on purpose because they left it open-ended. In lean, we are actually very prescriptive, saying that you're only done building something when customers use it and get value from it. So we take it to that step of just building something that works and looks amazing and is functional is not enough. You have to have it adopted. So when I look at the question, when you say Spotify Agile or just Agile in general, a lot of it is focused on build execution, which is how do I reduce the technical complexity or technical risk in a product. At the lean level, we're working at the business model level. Sometimes it's not even the fact that can I build this product, but will anyone buy it, right? So it's a pricing risk. If you're trying to charge $1,000 and no one wants to buy your product, that's going to just kill your business, and it has nothing to do with the fact that you could build it or it's functioning or not. So that's how I would parse that out.
Yeah, and it looks like Pat is, I'm not sure if he's joking or what. He said he was saying mom doesn't count, and she might be the first investor.
Sure. Well, if she's going to invest, you can obviously take advantage of that.
Well, so one thing I've noticed here in Pensacola is we have a lot of law firms that have won these multi-million and billion-dollar suits, and so they've been doing a lot of investing in some of the startups. But when you got enough money, you can keep working at something till you or buy companies or whatever to get something to work. But the lean startup methodology, it sort of helps keep you from wasting money. So could you clarify that a little bit for folks?
Yeah. So again, yes. So the challenge with just the perseverance based on faith, or just the fact that you can get into what we sometimes call the zombie startup mode, like you're not going to die, but you're also not going to take off. It's not a very good place to be once you appreciate that the most important resource in any startup, actually in life in general, is not money or how many people you have on your team, but it's how much time you're spending on the idea.
Okay.
So timing is, in my opinion, the scarcest resource, Because if you think of it, money can fluctuate up and down. You can get an investor tomorrow, you can get more money. You can add people to your project. There could be volunteers. You could pay them, right? So people and resources can fluctuate up or down. Time is one of those things. Once you miss it, you miss it. So a lot of people could say, if I could go back in time and do what Starbucks did or what Facebook did, I would just go ahead and do that, and I would be, a gazillionaire now. But of course, we can go back in time. At least we don't have the ability to do it. So to me, the way I read into all of that is that the most important thing one should be doing with their idea is first testing, is the time for this idea right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at a lot of ideas in history, Facebook wasn't first at what they were doing. Microsoft wasn't first in the things we know them for. Apple, Google, I can just keep going. But, so the first movers seldom win. Skype wasn't first. It takes a few iterations, a few other ideas to kind of take a bat on the at the ballpark to actually hit one out. And so the biggest thing that as an entrepreneur you need to do is, when you have an idea, is start to quickly ask, is this idea going to work now? And if not, will it work in the future? Can I afford to wait? And if the answer is no, because the market isn't ready yet, it's actually in your best interest to move on to maybe another idea, or park this idea and go do something else in the time being. But trying to brute force that idea is just not going to necessarily get you to that kind of traction. So being too early is almost as bad as being too late to an idea, because you're just going to eventually lose out to the person that just has the right timing.
Yeah. So being early, but also is the technology for what you want to do readily available for you to do it. And so, like, let's say the idea that I was working on when I first learned about the business model canvas, and one of the features that I needed, the payment feature, wasn't really there yet. I was waiting on this company, Dwala, to come around, and so like you could actually make instant payments, and this was like in 2011, 2012. But now that technology is readily available. Anybody can integrate payments into their applications, and so I've been tempted, to kind of go back and revisit that idea, just because the technology is available now, and it wasn't, back when I was doing. But I still need to follow the lean startup methodology.
There could be there could be something else, right? So, but I think that is what, like, fundamentally, when you start, I show that experimentation loop. Once you have an idea, you need to start putting something in front of customers, and if they start adopting it, then that's a sign that this is the right time for the idea, and you keep doubling down on it, and until you get stuck, and then you try to solve it. And if it's just something where with evidence you show that this is not the right time for it, then you truly get stuck. But that's how you would kind of interpret that. I also started an idea in the early 2000s where I assumed that everyone is going to have broadband access. I was one of the first persons on my block that went and got a DSL connection back in the day. Okay. And I said, oh, this is the future. Everyone's going to have this. So I started building services, assuming that was the norm. And sure enough, it was way too early. Like, It took me 2 years and no one was there. And then I eventually had to I could not wait any longer. I had to move on to other things.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not sure whether this question may have came from Facebook, but Lloyd Jr. posted it. He said, would you be willing to clarify the second phase about identifying risks? That's the first part of the question. And could you please give examples you have come across for success and pitfalls?
Okay. So on clarifying risk, it's going to be a function, again, of stage. So when we look at any idea, and if I just ask you, what are the risks in your idea, you can probably fill up a book with it, because there are so many things. I don't have the right team. I don't have a team built out. I don't have money. I don't have resources. I don't have all the brand, all these things. You start filling it out. But the way that we try to figure out what is riskiest is figure out, where are you right now? If you have no customers today because you're just starting out, your first immediate objective should be, how do I get to customer number 1? Not 100, not 1,000. How do I get the first customer? Like, what am I going to say to them? And who is that person? And you just start thinking through that and go and talk. And sometimes to get one customer, you have to talk to 10 people. Sometimes you have to talk to 100 people. But in that conversation, through the objections that they have, which is, does your thing work? Show me proof, show me all these things. Those are like evidence of risk. If you want to charge them something they're not used to paying, they're going to say, that's just too expensive. Why should I pay this much for your product? So that's where you're going to find your riskiest assumptions. Unfortunately, it's not something, there are some universal starting risks. So all things being equal, I will say that for most ideas, focusing on who your early adopters are, who your customers, your starting customers are, and what top problems you solve is a good place to start. Okay. But you still have to go and do this discovery process, because sometimes that's easy to identify. If you take something like the pandemic, our early adopters, there's like 8 billion people around the world that would love a cure to not a cure, but a problem, a solution to the pandemic.
Yes.
So there, it's not so much a question of what's the riskiest assumption. The risk quickly moves towards how do we really address the problem that we have, whether it's getting rid of the virus or all these things. But the point is that it's going to vary from idea to idea, but you have to start with where you are and start asking, what do I need to do to get more adoption or more customers? That's how I would. And then there was a second part of the question. The second part was
let me see here. Let me go back, find it real quick. Could you give examples you have come across for success and pitfalls?
Oh, the pitfalls, yes. So in the beginning, I would say the biggest pitfall that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and it's just the human condition, and especially the entrepreneurial condition, is that we tend to overvalue technical risk. Like we believe that the only thing holding us back is the fact that we can build our product, and the fact that our solution is not exist in this world. If we could just build this, everything else would be great. And what we have actually found from years of testing is that oftentimes the first solutions you build are not going to hit the mark. So it's much better to start to test your solution in different ways. And this is where the idea of the minimum viable product comes in. Don't build 100 features when only one feature is required. And even before the minimum viable product, a demo could be just as effective. Anyone who has ever funded a Kickstarter campaign or some kind of a crowdfunding campaign did that not because they were able to test out the product, but because they saw a video and a demo and they said, this seems interesting, I want to back it, right?
Yes.
And that's what customers do all the time. And so you don't even need a functioning product to make a sale. And this is a very counterintuitive piece, is we teach people how to sell a demo, not sell their product. So sell the demo first. And if your demo doesn't...
So we need to stop there and make sure people get that. So,
I think it's an important tactic, but I think it's a very powerful one. So if I slow it down, if we think of how we go about building a product, we build it first, we then go to a sales process, show it to a customer, and then they buy it. So it's build, demo, sell.
Yeah.
The lean startup really advocates demo, sell, build. So
demo, sell, build. Demo, sell, build. And that's because like when we're trying to introduce people to the lean startup methodology and doing the ecosystem, within the ecosystem stuff, it's hard. They find it hard to believe that you can demo an idea and sell it and then build it. That doesn't make sense to them.
It doesn't make sense, but that's why, like I gave the example of crowdfunding. People do it all the time.
Yes.
I can give you another example. Like whenever you see Apple launch a product, or any company for that matter, they don't give you the product to use. They show you a demo on stage. And yes, they have a brand and we trust them and all the stuff, but the fact is they're showing you a demo and you're buying into it. Why is that any different with a customer? But we as entrepreneurs tend to believe that if we show a demo, the customer is going to say, prove it. And they're going to want to take out a screwdriver and open our product up. And that just doesn't happen. There was a team I was coaching and they were building an AI solution. So I know AI was brought up early on. And they said, surely if we go to our big clients and we say we are using AI, they're going to say, show me a working prototype. And we don't have that yet. It's going to take us 3 months to build or 2 months to build. I'm like, go and tell them that anyways. And if they say they want to see a demo, schedule a follow-up meeting. Well, guess what happened? They went and did their demo, or they went and did their pitch. And the customer said, we would love to start a pilot with you. We would love to see if your product really works. So they actually asked for a sale. They didn't ask for proof that it works. And so this is the part that we have always failed to appreciate, is that customers want your solution. Like if you can nail a problem, they want to try it. And of course, if it doesn't work, they're going to give it back to you.
Yeah. And so, so one of our startups, they're actually out, spending hundreds of thousands building, and, but they're showing some demos of what it's going to look like, and they're getting some traction that way, and I think they're also letting, the students or customers use it, but it seems a little scary and risky, spending that kind of money and not having, a lot of students validate that it's actually working. I'm guessing they probably are, but I don't know, and that's kind of, yeah. So it looks like we have another question. I'm not, Lloyd Jr., I'm not sure what this says. It says, Patrick asked, what age did you found of what does that mean? Fund your first, or I'm not sure what it's asking there. And then also, and where did you gain experience that inspired a problem to solve?
So if I maybe try to understand the first question, maybe it was when I did my first startup. I'm guessing.
Maybe that's probably what it is.
Yeah, so I've always had the entrepreneurial bug. So I guess throughout my teenage years, I got to a point where I wanted to do a startup. I was actually an expat in the US, so I was not allowed to legally do my own startup. But when I graduated from school, I did the next best thing, which is join another startup. So that's how I got started.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined a startup for a number of years, and it was actually good in hindsight. So I learned a lot of my early lessons, not with my own risk and blood and sweat and equity, but by watching the founders of that company make their own mistakes. So we launched 2 or 3 products. They didn't really work, but one of them did work. The company got acquired eventually, so it was a pretty decent exit. So I took those. I was probably 23, 24 when that happened, and that's when I started my own first startup. But to finish that story, I mentioned the artist phase. A lot of what I was doing was the things that I tell people not to do, which is I lock myself up in the metaphorical garage, and I spent a whole year not talking to customers because I had an idea that was so amazing. All I had to do was build it. And so I spent all this time just building with my team. And then when we launched it, that's when the real learning began. And I realized that so much of this I could have done a year ago. I didn't have to wait a year to do this. And so we just wasted a year in that process. Yeah. So stealth is never a good tactic. That's just one of those lessons learned. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of how I got started. And then from there, it was a multi-year journey to start to learn just how to build products better. So even to this day, when people sometimes read my books and say, I wish I read your book sooner, I tell them the same thing. Me too. I wish I read some of these lessons sooner, because I made all the mistakes that I tell people.
Yeah. So this is, I think, what you're saying, and this demo sell build thing is a really key point, because one of our founders, they have Sabrina. She and her husband has a garbage or junk removal business, but they've been doing this for a couple of years now, and they have this idea to use AI to actually go from a picture and some of their data to actually creating a quote automatically. But she doesn't have a technical background. Her husband doesn't have a technical background, and so she's so when a founder is in that situation, and you also think about this lean startup methodology, and when you think about this demo sell build, thing, how would that apply in a situation like that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that as you're saying, that I would say they're kind of 2 things. When I see a team like that, where they have got an idea, but they don't have the
They got
technical.
data. The one thing they have is data, to build their AI.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
but so they do have the data that would
Okay.
allow them to build it.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in those cases, I would still say that the end goal is the same, which is if you can demonstrate early traction, which is show me a list of customers who are willing, in this case, to maybe look at a report from that data. So you have data, but data by itself is just raw materials. Like you have to
Yeah.
do something with the data. So go and show me a demo of what this data could show. Show me the magic the data can show.
Yeah.
If it's a report that it can, allow somebody to save money or make money because they can see how this data gets actionable, and a customer gets excited by it. Now all of a sudden you've got a customer or a pipeline of customers who would say, if you can make this real, I will buy it. And you can test pricing. So once you show a demo and people get it, you can then start testing pricing, and then you've got a pipeline of customers. You may not be able to charge them, obviously, because you've not built this yet. But with that evidence, you can now go to a data scientist, someone who are hard to find these days, and they don't want to work because they don't want to work on risky stuff. So you can say, look, we already have the data. We already know what we want to do with the data. We need you to come and make this magic happen. And there's customers lined up. So you have now de-risked it for someone who may join your company, potentially as a co-founder, potentially as first employee. And that is, again, a great way of de-risking. So fundamentally, and this is the job of the entrepreneur is taking the vision that you have and systematically de-risking it over time.
Yes.
You have to de-risk it for your first customers, so they buy from you. You have to de-risk it for your investors, so they put money. You have to also de-risk it for your co-founders, so they quit their day jobs and come work with you.
Yeah.
So that would be what I would suggest there.
Yeah. So one of the analogies for that is the company Part Pick. When Jewel came up with the idea, she was working in a call center, and people kept saying, "I got the picture of the part. Where can I find the part at?" And then so she started thinking about this Shazam app. When they hear the sound, it tells you what the song is. And so she was not a technical person either, but so that's the kind of analogy I would tell Sabrina. That lady, she didn't know how to build it, and so she kept looking around, and was in Atlanta. So Miss Cephas was right there in Atlanta. She was getting a PhD in AI, and so they ended up hooking up. Long story, Amazon bought the company. And say that's an example, and it's using AI to go from a picture to where you can find the part.
Right. And it just goes back to say that the customer and the problem are the most important aspects, and we oftentimes start with the solution box. Like we start asking ourselves, what can I build that's new and unique in this world? But if you can unlock a customer problem that is unmet or unsolved, that is it. That's where the opportunity lies. And most people aren't really looking for problems or don't know, to stumble into them and ignore them. But that's exactly the example you gave. Is there was a problem worth solving that this person identified, and then finding the solution. There are a lot of people who can build that solution. She managed to find the right partner, and of course they made it happen. Not to say that's easy, but at the same time, that's the second part of the story.
So so I think that having, as an entrepreneur, you're going on a journey, and the point I wanted to make too is that you have a methodology with this lean startup methodology. If you follow the methodology, it will get you where you want to go. You just have to it's going to take time to get there.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that what's if we look at different methodologies before, someone mentioned agile, and then of course there have been many other methodologies before that. Like lean is fundamentally about, when you look at build, measure, learn, we are putting things in smaller chunks, smaller iterations in front of customers. So when I was writing my first book, I did not write the book and then try to sell it. I did the demo, sell, build. So I just came up with the concept. I came up with a table of contents, built a landing page, drove traffic to it, and got people interested, right? If people weren't interested in the landing page, why write the book? And that was my thought process. If no one's going to buy the book before I write it, I'm not going to write the book. And it sounds very counterintuitive, but it was it's just the whole way you flip it all upside down. And that's what lean is about. Is let's start with the customer, and if we can't find the problem they want to solve, let's keep looking. And once we find that, then let's start showing them a demo of the solution. If they like that, then let's start building the solution. If they like that, let's start optimizing that. So that's just how the process goes.
Yes, and so so you wrote these books, and now you have a online accelerator program, or I'm not sure, accelerator in a box. I'm not sure what you call it. So why did you create this accelerator in a box? So you
Well, so I guess the short answer is that when I first started doing this, I was doing it just for myself. Like
Yes.
I was stumbling, not knowing what I was doing wrong. And so I started blogging, I started sharing my own learnings, and then that turned into a book. My readers in the blog encouraged me to write the book. It was not even my idea. So that's just how I got started. But as I began to promote the book, I went around the world, traveled, and I pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of traveling. And I began to realize that there are entrepreneurs everywhere, and we are all more alike than unalike. We all kind of think the same way, want the same things, make the same mistakes. And so that was the big inspiration for what we did with Lean Stack and even this accelerator. It took me 7 years. The 7 years is a long time, but it took me 7 years to transform from that artist mode of building building something I thought would work to now flipping things around and testing before I build. So it was a kind of a 7-year entrepreneurial journey.
And I've saw quite a bit of that, because I remember in 2015 I got an account on your leanstack.com website, and you came a long way since then.
Yeah, and so really what the accelerator and all this like sharing is for is trying to get the next generation of entrepreneurs. We're all going to start as artists. That's just how we start. But don't take 7 years to start, becoming an innovator. So if we can shorten that cycle from 7 years to 1 year or 3 months, then we'll create a lot more entrepreneurs in the world, and that's really our mission. So that's how I look at it. So the whole idea of the accelerator platform is we have taken some of those mindsets, demo, sell, build, starting with the business model. There are a few others, and there are 10 core mindsets we have, and we start to just teach that. So we have a foundations course. We've got some different courses, but we just start to teach that to entrepreneurs so that they can start practicing this and hopefully have more success faster than we all did in our times.
Yeah, and I'm excited about your program. Do you have that slide handy that shows, that breaks it out, what that's like? And because my goal is to get that and offer it to our folks here, and so we can kind of move forward. Because it's one thing for you to have the methodology there, but to me it's nice to have it in a box so people can experience, going through and actually using it.
Yeah. So if I'm not sure if this is what you're talking about, but I'll just quickly share.
I think it's the slide where you break it up in the first phase and then the second phase. That's it.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were talking about. So what we have essentially, if we look at what we're looking at here, there's a hockey stick, and you can see some timelines. But if you look at the significant milestone for a startup is product market fit, and you probably all heard that term. It's when the hockey stick starts to grow really fast. That's when investors get really excited. Most people don't know how to get there. When they think of product market fit, it's let's just go and do a bunch of stuff, and we'll get there, and then we raise money. What we have tried to do is really focus in. Most people don't focus on the early stage, but we have broken that into a series of campaigns and journeys and goals and objectives. And behind each of those, what you're seeing up on the top are different milestones. So we start with mindset. So we teach people foundations, which is how to do demo, sell, build, how to sell before you build, those kinds of things of the business model. We then start to teach people very early on how to think of their business model as a product. Like you can start designing your business model day one. That's what that business model design course is.
Okay.
And then a lot of the other pieces are just various techniques, running experiments, using metrics, being able to pitch your products and how to pitch your products. And that's what demand generation is. But that's just what this is. So we really focus in on the earlier stages. Not everyone talks about once you have made it, that part is, I won't say it's easy, but it's easier once you have product market fit to then get an investor and grow your business. There are different challenges. It's more, scaling challenges, company culture, operational, profit, all that stuff. But at the early stages, it's all about, do we really have something worth doing? Is it really something worth investing 3 years of our life on? And that's what we spend time on. So that's what Lean Stack is we focus on the left side of that hockey stick versus the right side.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's right. And I'm glad you used the term mindset, because sometimes it takes people months and a year or so to get the right mindset, and that mindset is very, very important. And so I think that would be like a great addition, to what we're trying to do here. And you mentioned that foundations part. We can actually let anybody into that part, and then when you start working on those next phases, that's when we only let certain number of companies get into that part of the program.
Yeah. So in our interest for like making this content available, foundations and business model design, we make completely free. So both of those.
The business model, demand generation also.
No, not demand. So if you kind of break it out this way, so like all the, I guess if you look at this first two courses here, foundations, business model design, we make completely free for people to come in. So what you learn there is how to think this way, how to use tools like the Lean Canvas. We have a few other tools like the traction model, how to like size your idea. Is it really big? Is it worth pursuing? So we give all that away because we want people to work on big ideas that are going to match your ambition, like whatever the ambition, whether you want to raise money, whether you want to do a lifestyle business, whether you want to build a restaurant, like whatever that is, we help you size that. And that's what those two things are. And that we actually give away. The places where where we make our business model works is when you get into like acceleration, or when you like start like the validation work. We have some tools and other courses there, and that's like all the validation framework and value delivery stuff.
Okay, but that's exactly what I was talking about. So last call for questions, because we're about out of time here. Yes. So I think I like the way you gave some examples, and I was trying to get some examples for some of our founders and what they're struggling with. And I think the message that I really want to leave people with is that, like there is a methodology. That's one thing but like if you're at the stage where you don't know what problem you're going to solve yet, but it's still a good time to start trying to understand about the ecosystem and what all the resources are that are in it. So when you do stumble on that problem that you want to solve, the methodology and the approach, to kind of move forward, and that's And then if you have idea and not sure what to do, then you got the methodology there to do it as well. And then you talked about this foundation thing, and what I noticed, when people pitch their ideas to me, you can almost see the weaknesses in the foundation based on if they follow the Lean Startup methodology or not, and that's kind of what I like about it as well. So I think it's really fantastic. So you have any parting words, Ash, that you want to share or recommend?
So I noticed my T-shirt came out backwards here just because I think my camera.
I see it fine. I see it looks great to me.
But love the problem, not your solution. So I would say that has been my my big lesson learned, and what we always try to get across is a very simple idea, but a very hard thing to really put to practice, because we always tend to gravitate towards product and solutions, way too quickly in my experience. So the more time you can spend trying to deeply understand the problem, you actually start to really understand what it is that you need.
So
what
love
it is
the
that
problem,
you
not the solution. So that's a fantastic takeaway. Yeah, because people are really passionate about their idea, their solution, and but yeah, so yeah, it's that's pretty neat. Yeah, well, we looks like we got some good comments in here, and folks really appreciate you coming on, and sharing your wisdom. And my job now is to get this your training into their hands, so they can actually take advantage of the tools that you created. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks a million, and we'll be keeping in touch, and hopefully we'll be reaching out to you soon to get started with your training solution. All right, thanks a million.
Thank you, Lloyd.
All right, bye bye everyone.
Bye everyone.